Detail advance. Prepare to post colors. Post. Present arms. Order arms. Present arms. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Order arms. Present arms. Order arms. Detail retreat.
This Veterans Day, we salute Zacharias Valdez and Colonel Tom Dooley, who valiantly served the United States during World War II. Collin County native Thomas Dooley was born December 18, 1913, son of Annie Mae and Thomas P. Dooley. After high school, Dooley enrolled at Texas A&M, where he was active as a Ross volunteer and head Yell leader. He graduated with a degree in agricultural engineering in 1935. After enlisting in the U.S. Army, he was stationed in the Philippines, where he garnered the attention of General Jonathan Wainwright and later served as his aide-de-camp. At the beginning of World War II, he was awarded the Silver Star for action during the bombing of Clark Field in the Luzon region of the Philippines and was also awarded the Legion of Merit. While fighting on Bataan and Corregidor, General Wainwright gained a reputation for pursuing perilous journeys to the front lines to assess battle conditions and often joined in combat to assist the troops. Tom Dooley fought alongside him. Both men narrowly escaped death on numerous occasions. After the horrific battles at Bataan, Allied forces were forced to retreat to Corregidor, and as San Jacinto Day, April 21, 1942, approached, Colonel George F. Moore, A&M Class of '08, asked Major Tom Dooley, Class of '35, to compile a list of Aggies still fighting on Bataan and Corregidor for a roll call at muster on April 21st, San Jacinto Day in Texas. This list was embedded into a wire service transmission, which enabled families to know the status of their loved ones. Its impact resonated beyond the Texas A&M community. Dooley had no idea that the story sent over the news service wire to the states would cause such a stir. The report was read by Congressman Luther Johnson and U.S. Senator Tom Connally, and published by newspapers across the nation. Spirits were lifted, at least momentarily, by the story of the gallant stand on Corregidor. The story has become a muster legend as the news reports all over the country described how the Aggies sang songs and gave evidence that their fighting spirit was up to the traditions of Aggie land. Recalling decades later, Colonel Dooley noted that the Aggie muster assured America that the spirit of San Jacinto was alive and well. Jerry Cooper, author of To Bataan and Back, the World War II diary of Major Thomas Dooley, observed, Tom Dooley started a journal a week after the attacks began and kept it updated for 3.5 years of captivity. These 6 handwritten volumes convey the strength, the despair, the simple joy of being alive. Collected in the book To Bataan and Back, the World War II Diary of Major Thomas Dooley, are notes about forming a choir to sing for impromptu church services, collecting recipes that were shared at imaginary meals, and even poems lampooning officers to keep spirits high. Whatever they could dream up was added to the mix. The most amazing thing was that Dooley managed to bring the journals home with him. Following his release from a Japanese prisoner of war camp, Dooley boarded the USS Missouri and joined General Jonathan Wainwright and General Douglas MacArthur to witness the Japanese surrender. In 1992, in an interview for the Kentucky New Era, Dooley said of his imprisonment, "I never had any doubt that I would come out of it all right." Colonel Dooley had a wife, Catherine Dade Kitty Dooley, a son, Thomas Peter Dooley II of Louisville, a daughter, Mrs. Tom Mary Randolph Randy Peters of Louisville, and a granddaughter, Kate Elizabeth Dooley.
On December 8, 1941, the Japanese invaded the Philippines. Zacharias Valdez was 22 years old and a college student at the University of the Philippines. Colonel Martin Moses inducted Valdez into the U.S. Army, 12th Infantry under the command of Brigadier General William Brower. This division was the first unit of the Philippine Army to encounter the enemy. Stephen L. Moore, author of As Good as Dead, declared, "Valdez, whose grandson is a longtime Allen resident, was finishing his degree at the University of the Philippines in Los Baños when the Japanese invasion took place. Valdez enlisted in the U.S. Army to help defend his country. He rose from the rank of private to being promoted to 3rd lieutenant for his battlefield valor. At one point, he met and fought alongside U.S. General Douglas MacArthur. The American and Filipino soldiers were captured in May 1942 and were forced to walk a 65-mile march without food and water, known as the infamous Bataan Death March. Thousands perished during the march due to the brutality and torture of the Japanese captors. Valdez survived the march and was incarcerated in Capas, Tarlac. There, he was assigned duty of burying the soldiers who died the previous night, including the soldier who formerly slept beside him. Contracting malaria, he was emaciated and on the brink of starvation. Anticipating death, he had a vision from the Blessed Virgin Mary, who told him that he would be released and will overcome his trials and tribulations. Regaining his health, Valdez escaped and joined the guerrilla movement with the rank of captain. Unfortunately, the Japanese were warned that he was part of the underground movement and was captured in Pangasinan, where he was beaten with wood. After the war, Valdez completed his degrees at the University of the Philippines and was offered a full scholarship to obtain a master's degree at Texas A&M, and upon completion, he returned to the Philippines. At the University of Santo Tomas, he was offered a position in 1967 as Dean of College of Agriculture at the newly established Mindanao State University in Marawi City, Lanao del Sur. Valiant efforts by the Filipinos and the Americans thwarted the anticipated invasion of Australia and diverted Japanese forces from other areas, which impacted the Battle of the Coral Sea that was the first major setback to the Japanese Empire. The fighting spirit of Valdez, Dooley, and all Americans who fought to keep our country strong are recognized this Veterans Day. Stephen L. Moore, author of As Good as Dead.
I have a presentation from the Office of the Mayor of the City of Allen. This certificate of appreciation is proudly presented to Chet Roan in recognition of his service to our great nation during times of war, conflict, and peace. The Allen City Council wishes to express our deepest appreciation to him and all the men and women through their military service who have kept and keep our nations free. Presented the 11th day of November 2020. Was it this to you? And I also present a certificate as well to Roland Cannon. And we also have one for Colonel Tom Dooley, who is not present tonight. And last but very not least is Certificate of Appreciation to Zacharias Valdez, awarded posthumously to his grandson, John Game.
First, I would like to thank the City of Allen and the Allen Public Library for hosting this safe and inspirational program this evening. Thank you to all the heroes that I have the honor and privilege of sharing the stage with tonight, and all those watching for your service and sacrifice. Thank you also to the mayor and Tom Keener for being generous and gracious for allowing my grandfather's story to be shared this evening. Although I'm standing here tonight by myself, I'm actually not, as I'm standing here on behalf of my grandfather and his most important legacy, his family. A family that spans the globe, living in Australia, the Philippines, and several states across America. I stand here for his 3 daughters and 4 sons, 2 of which are named after US presidents, Washington and Lincoln. I stand here as the oldest of 19 grandchildren, and I stand here for his 13 great-grandchildren, 2 of them which attend Beverly Cheatham Elementary School. Go Chargers. I also stand here for my beautiful grandmother, who I never met, as she was tragically and unjustly killed in the Philippines before I was born. And of course, I stand here for my lolo, who would have been 101 years old last week on his birthday, November 5th. For those who are wondering, lolo means grandfather in Tagalog, which is the national language of the Philippines. I stand here for him and his deeply rooted faith, but also for the principles, the values, and the pillars that were solidified in him during World War II and would serve as the foundation of how he would live the rest of his life. 4 principles that he learned while being bombed and in the trenches, fighting alongside soldiers from Texas and Minnesota. 4 values that allowed him and fellow soldiers from California and Ohio to keep surviving and marching during the Bataan Death March. 4 pillars that he and soldiers from the Washington State and Illinois would hold on to, cling on to, as they were beaten and starved while in the prison camps. For my lolo, these 4 tenets were integrity, respect, decency, and honor. The courage displayed by both American and Filipino soldiers in Asia Pacific in World War II was defined not by where they were born, not whether they were Filipino or American, but how they all together upheld these core and fundamental values of our democracy. These principles, this bravery, is what all of our veterans, past, present, and future, have and will always believe in and display when our democracy is threatened. In closing, I want to thank all of you again for this humble honor bestowed upon my lolo and my family. And we'd like to say one more thing to our lolo. We cannot thank you enough, lolo, for laying the foundation of integrity, respect, decency, and honor for us and for future generations. And we will do our best every day to make you proud, not just with our words, but also through our actions. Maraming salamat, mahal kita.
Good evening. My name's Ken Falk. First, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you to all of our veterans in our country and the things that the veterans have done to help preserve the freedom in our country. Secondly, I always look forward to this event every year because it's such an inspiring event, all the activities that go on and listening to the stories of our heroes. And yes, they are our heroes. So let's enjoy the evening and let's enjoy the stories. Thank you.
Tell us about the time you liberated the Nazi concentration camp.
Okay, that was right near the very end of the war. In fact, the war was over as soon as we liberated it. It was Mauthausen in Linz, Austria. A big permanent camp, not like some of the other ones. This had been like a federal prison back in the 30s. But it was just as bad as all the rest. We saw a lot of horrible things during the war, but nothing like that. We knew that we were going to be going to a concentration camp because for 20 miles there were dead people in the ditches with striped uniforms on. And we said, what's going on? So we got out and looked at them. They'd all been shot in the back of the head. So we got to Linz, Austria, and most of the guards had run off. We caught a few of them, but not many. But it was, you could smell it from blocks away. When I first walked in, there were dead people all over, thousands of them. We'd never seen anything like that before. Some of them were still alive, most of them were dead. And I was able to talk to some of the people. There were a few people that could speak English that had been in there, but not too long. And they could tell us a little about the camp and what was going on. I think they had between 20 and 30,000 prisoners in there. And nobody was ever going to get out. That was the idea. I talked to one fellow, the European, that had been on there only about a month. And he could still tell me about things. Had the run of the place. I saw the crematorium and the gas chamber and the place where they dissected people. It was something so foreign to us that unless you saw it, you wouldn't believe it. I can tell you how bad it was. There was an Austrian gentleman, I should say, young fellow, had a college degree. He was a medical doctor. He was tops on the Austrian football team, which is soccer. And when he graduated, Hitler said, I want to put you in the SS, and to get you started, we'll put you at Mauthausen in the clinic. So, of course, he didn't know what was going on, but he was in there. Well, he didn't last too long. He got out of there. But we found out later this guy was a maniac. He would tell prisoners that they had some disease and they was going to have to chloroform them or whatever for a little while so he could operate on them. When they were out, he cut their heads off, boiled them, and gave the skulls to his friends for desk ornaments. I still can't believe it, but it happened. It did happen. I don't know how many were killed at Mauthausen, probably 20,000, 30,000. But that was just one of many camps. And we'd seen a lot of horrible things during the war, but nothing like that. It was almost defied description. And I spent one whole day in it, never went back. We had to bury them with bulldozers. It was just, I can't even give you the words how bad it was. And I get emotional every time I think about it. They just killed people with no reason at all. So I've been back to Mauthausen several times. I've been back to Europe about 4 times. Our division would have a reunion, summer reunion, so I would do that. But the thing that was amazing to me, we met 3 people younger than I was, 2 ladies and a gentleman. And the man, one of the men came up to me and he said, "Thank you for saving my wife." I said, "What wife did I save?" Well, he didn't know. He was married to one of these 3 people. They were very young. Well, they were born there on flat cars coming in or in the area. And the only reason they weren't killed, the Nazi guards had all run off. But I still correspond with him. He's a doctor in Madison, Wisconsin, or I'm from Wisconsin. I've been out and had lunch with him. And I said, "How could this happen?" We still shake our heads. A lot of people say there was no Holocaust, or it wasn't so bad. It was worse than you could even imagine. And I hate to think about it.
That's an incredible story. What, in terms of today, how does it make you feel that you helped liberate innocent people who are being tortured and facing death?
Well, obviously, I'm sure glad we did. I'm from German extraction. I couldn't believe that civilized people would do things like this to other people. And there are still people that say there wasn't a Holocaust. Well, believe me, there was.
And you're an eyewitness to that.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Battle of the Bulge. What were you doing during the Battle of the Bulge?
I was in the combat engineers. I was a machine gunner on a half-track. At least I didn't have to walk. But the Battle of the Bulge was terrifically cold. It went to 20 below zero. I couldn't put water. I had an old-fashioned American machine gun with a water jacket. Well, I didn't dare put water in it. It would have frozen up. So I had to shoot it dry, which meant I couldn't shoot very long. Just everything short bursts. So I learned how to do that. A good share of what we shot at were enemy planes, fighter planes, as well as German infantry.
Allen, Texas lost a soldier during the Christmas Day Battle of the Bulge. Tell us what you were doing on Christmas Day, 1944.
Well, we did not have a Christmas dinner. I had been over in France along the coast, and we were supposed to originally liberate some of the German naval bases on the English Channel. And the infantry couldn't crack a lot of these, so they decided an armored division might be able to do it. Before we do that, we heard somebody say, "We hear there's trouble over in Belgium." So the next thing I know, we're on the road, and I don't know, it took us 4 or 5 days from the coast to get over to Belgium. And it got colder and colder. if you were wounded, if you didn't have a buddy to have him give you some help, you froze to death. It got, somebody said it went down to 25 below. I believe it. I believe it. We could have had trouble starting any of our vehicles. It was a horrible winter. I'm glad that the rest of my war wasn't in that kind of thing. There was nothing pretty about the Battle of the Bulge. It was, there were 500,000 Germans and 500,000 Americans. It was the biggest battle American soldiers have ever been in. I think the base of the Bulge was roughly 50 miles, the base, and the point of the Bulge went 45, 50 miles. They covered a lot of miles, and we had a lot of towns to liberate. But we had the superior equipment. Germans had very good machine guns. They had some pretty good tanks, but we had some better equipment. I think the best weapon the Germans had was the 88 millimeter cannon, which was probably the best cannon in the whole war, in the entire war. But we had very good weapons. And I was sure glad when it was over. It was.
The Americans were confronting this terrible battle. What factors do you think enabled the Americans to win over the Germans in this terrible battle?
I didn't quite get the what.
What did you think that the turning point was for America in this terrible Battle of the Bulge?
Well, I think we were all trained pretty well. That helped. And the bombers, of course, tore up Germany and Austria, unbelievably. We outlasted them. Germans had good equipment, there wasn't any question about it. They had some darn good tanks. They had a better machine gun than I had. The MG-34 and the MG-42 were superb machine guns, but I guess we had more of them. And we had pretty good training. We had a good general. So I guess that was the tipping point.
Did you ever meet General Patton?
Never met him, but I saw him.
Tell us about that.
I was an enlisted man. You didn't get to meet generals. I saw him at a river crossing one time. He was watching a bridge go up. And that's what we did, and the engineers put bridges over. All night long, we'd take teller mines out of the road. I had the German truck that was laying them in the snow, and we could hear the truck ahead of us. So I didn't like the Bulge. The rest of the war was just easy, really, for us. And we were lucky. We had transportation, and we had a lot of firepower. It wasn't fun, but it was. I'm glad I was in the position I was in.
One more question about the concentration camp. I'd read accounts at this particular camp that the smell was getting increasingly worse as you got closer. How did that make you feel inside when you realized how many people were imprisoned?
Well, the rate of see, they brought all the people from the north because the north was being bombed heavily. So they were forcing them down into Austria, the prisoners. They wanted to get them away from the Americans. But half of them died. Either when they weren't fed or they just shot them. And where we first realized was probably about 20 miles from Mount Hausen when we started seeing all these dead guys in striped uniforms. So we got off and looked, and they'd all been shot in the back of the head. If you couldn't keep up, they just murdered you. It was worse than anything I'd ever seen.
Well, I want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Mr. Cannon, you want to tell us about Vietnam?
Okay.
In August of '69, I joined the Army, and in March, I finished my advanced training in Virginia to learn that I was the only one of 25 from my class who had been chosen to go to Vietnam. Wasn't first alphabetical, wasn't last, but I was the one who got to go. I arrived in Vietnam on April 17th, just a few days before my 20th birthday. What I did in Vietnam, I provided, primarily I provided logistical support for a 1,000-man unit. I provided equipment, repair parts, and building materials. On any one day I would be on the road. Virtually every time I was on the road, I was by myself. Never did I have a radio. One day when I was out to pick up some large heavy equipment, we were in a tractor trailer, and out in the middle of nowhere, dirt road, miles from any kind of civilization, the tractor broke down. So I have a young soldier, about a year younger than me, very new in Vietnam, said, "So what do we do?" I said, "Well, I think we'll take our M16s and get down under the front of the truck, and you take up one side, and I'll take up the opposite side, and we'll hope and wait for somebody to come and find us." So meantime, it was monsoon season, it was pouring down rain, and I'm laying in the mud with water running over my chest, holding onto my M16 and my ammunition. Fortunately for me, finally a U.S. convoy came by, and they managed to get in touch with our unit, and finally somebody got there and towed us in. But it was very frightening being out there, broke down on the road alone. And again, no radio. As time moved on in Vietnam, my unit was redeployed down to the Mekong Delta, and I was in a combat construction engineering unit. We built roads and bridges and schools and generally infrastructure type projects. We had two base camps about 20 miles apart. We were miles and miles from anywhere. I'd gone down for a oral interview, and as I was walking out of my oral interview, I noticed a helicopter on our helipad. I ran over to it and asked if I could get a ride, and they said, "Sure, no problem." So as we're making our flight over the border between Cambodia and Vietnam, we monitor an urgent call for assistance. The Military Advisory Committee on a Boston whaler boat had been ambushed. There was approximately 10 people on the boat. 3 were killed, and to my knowledge, at least 3 were wounded. We flew to their location. We were the first helicopter to arrive. We landed approximately a football field away from the river that they were on. One door gunner and myself made our way to the beach, or riverfront, and about 50 feet out from shore, I saw a soldier floating, and I believed he was still alive. So wearing combat boots and jungle fatigues, dove into the water, swam out, and become the focus of enemy fire. And they shot a lot of rounds at me. And I grabbed an individual in the water, only to discover that he was dead. He was also a full colonel and was probably due to retire before too long. I swam back to the beach with him. Meantime, a heavy firefight was going on from enemy fire across the river and our side. This was not something I ever was trained for. The door gunner and a U.S. Army major who had been shot in the stomach and a senior non-commissioned officer who had taken a round across the forehead, we retreated back to the helicopter. Everybody got on the helicopter, and then next thing I remember is the door gunner telling me, hey, start treating those people. Okay. So I applied a compression bandage to the major's stomach and prayed for him, and bandaged up the sergeant and stopped his bleeding. That was probably my worst day in Vietnam, actually, my very worst day. Most people never see the bullets that are supposed to kill them. As I swam just under the surface of the water, I saw the bullets that were supposed to kill me. I came back from Vietnam and was stationed at Fort Ord, California. And on 4th of July, I had gone home and got tires in my car, and my mom said, hey, son, you have a package from the Army. I said, what? She said, yeah, it's been all over the place. It had been to Germany and had been to Fort Dix, New Jersey. And anyway, so I opened it up, and it was my Bronze Star. So I went back to Fort Ord, and I'm talking to an NCO that I worked with, and he was telling me about his experiences in Vietnam and how he had been awarded a Bronze Star by a 2-star general at Fort Benning. And I said, wow. A lot of contrast here. I got mine from the postman, and he didn't believe me. Imagine that, me. He said, I'm ordering you to bring it in tomorrow with the orders. I said, okay, fine. I brought it in. He goes, this isn't yours, it's your dad. I said, no, it's not my dad's. I said, when my dad was in the Army, they had serial numbers. That's a Social Security number. He goes, let me hear this story again. So I told him, and they promptly had a award ceremony and presented me my Bronze Star. As a result of my time in Vietnam, I have PTSD, and I'm 50% disabled from that. And I also have prostate cancer as a result of Agent Orange exposure. Agent Orange, if you Google it, there were 12 hotspots for Agent Orange in Vietnam, and I was only in 4 of the 12. So, my family, my grandfather, my dad, my grandfather was in World War I, my dad was in World War II. I was in Vietnam. My son did 2 tours in Iraq. And I have 2 nephews that each did 1 tour in Iraq. And that, the war in Vietnam was much different than World War II. Armor, infantry, artillery, engineers, their job was pretty much the same. But helicopters made a huge difference. It saved many, many lives. It moved people in and out of combat quickly. And I still have a great respect for our pilots.
Can you tell us what the advantages you had and disadvantages you had with the soldiers in World War II?
The advantages?
And disadvantages. What do you think the disadvantages you had versus Vietnam?
Vietnam to me would have been horrible. I'm glad I didn't have to be in it. World War II was horrible in places too. Once is enough.
Mr. Cannon?
I think the big difference was World War II. We had millions of Americans who rushed to
join the service and take up arms against the Nazis. Vietnam, our country was very divided. Our political leaders were divided. Our college campuses were divided. I think even certain members of the military were divided. Most people who were drafted, shouldn't say most, but many people who were drafted were very bitter and unhappy about being drafted. They didn't believe in the war. You know, I joined. I was 19, and I felt that was what I was to do. That was the right thing for me to do. I look at people who didn't go, and over the years, my position on those who didn't go has softened somewhat.
I think he's right. I think the Vietnam War, our country was not behind it. World War II, I think everybody was behind it. Even kids were collecting pots and pans for the war effort. There's such a vast difference.
You know, Tom, when our veterans came back from World War II, they had ticker tape parades. I came back, I flew into Travis Air Base in Northern California, took a bus to Oakland Army Base, was fitted for a new uniform, got my orders, took a cab to San Francisco Airport and flew to LA. The only fanfare that I received was from my parents. You know, I've had more people thank me for my service in Texas than ever in California.
If you were to take some of the lessons that each of you learned in the military and applied it to your life, what would they be?
We don't want any more wars like that, like any of those. They were horrible. And you wonder, what did we really accomplish? We won, but the price was terrible, just terrible. You have to lose millions of people, billions and billions of dollars worth of equipment, for what?
Mr. Cannon?
Time does heal wounds. My son went to Command Staff General College at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and in his class there was a Vietnamese major. And now we look at Vietnam and our Navy ships port in Da Nang. So time does heal. It takes time, but I think we're better people for it.
What advice would you give to young people today regarding military preparedness?
Wow. Well, we certainly need to be prepared. And, you know, given the world climate right now with Iran, China, Russia, I don't think we can afford to let our guard down. We need to be prepared. And I think we need to realize that if this country was to be involved in another war, men and women would be drafted, you know, and that's not a popular thought among many. But you know what? It's just as much my daughter's country as it is mine.
Mr. Ron?
You see, our country was behind World War II, and everybody felt that way. So you didn't feel like you were doing anything out of the ordinary. I would not want to be in one of these post-war things because there didn't seem to be any reason for it. But Hitler, he was a maniac. We had to stop him. And I don't know. I wouldn't want to go through it again.
Yes, sir.
Tom, I think that politicians need to sit back, slow down, and think about what they're doing. If you're not in a war to win it, don't go. I don't think we were ever really in the war to win in Vietnam. And when you ask young men to go to war and die, they need to be certain that the cause that they're fighting for was worth the cost.